Welcome to another OCD Recovery Instagram Live. I thought I would come on here and cover some questions and answers because I haven't done those for a while, and I normally come on here and do topics. So I thought I would come on here today and cover all your questions and answers in relation to OCD. So if you have any questions you would like to ask me, just put them in the comments below here, anything related to OCD, and I will cover those now. So anything in relation to OCD, I will cover. I was going to talk, actually, I've got to be careful when I get started talking about something on OCD because I end up getting carried away with it and speaking about it for the whole call. So I'll do it just to get things started. But I wanted to talk a little bit about worst case scenario. I already covered it in one of the last Instagram lives and the importance about it. Worst case scenario is one of the most common things in REBT that Albert Ellis founded. It's all part of the breaking down the catastrophizing. So it's all about learning to see that things aren't awful and see in our worst case scenarios, they're not as scary as our mind makes them out to be. But we have that exaggeration in our head of this is the worst thing, nothing could be worse, where we take it out of the realms of possibility. So to 130% bad, 140% bad, so awful. We catastrophize these things. And this is what we tend to do. And as humans, we're irrational. And we tend to be irrational. We can be both rational and irrational. And we will blow these things out of proportion. And we will think things are the worst thing ever, the most unbearable thing of our fears, our worst case scenarios. But actually, when we look at them, they're not scary. Take, for example, a fear that you may have 0 followers and you may have not many friends, or 0 friends. Let's say that nobody liked you. This wouldn't be awful. You could still do everything, live, breathe, sleep, eat, have sex, do everything you want. You could still do all of those things. Maybe the having sex part requires a partner, but certainly all the other things you could do. So it certainly wouldn't be awful. You could still function, still do everything. So what we tend to do is we tend to think, oh my God, this would be the worst thing ever. This would be the scariest thing if this was to happen for ABC reasons. And that's where we get ourselves stuck, this catastrophizing, where we take things so much further than they are. And that is my job, is basically day to day breaking down people's catastrophized thinking, helping people to see things rationally where they're catastrophizing situations. And you see that in all areas. I see that when discussing breaking down irrational beliefs with people that I work with. I see that when discussing about people anxiety disorders and the best ways to approach them. People can be irrational in all areas. And it's learning to be rational, learning to look at the evidence that supports a particular belief. So let's take the belief of, what if nobody understands me? That wouldn't be ideal, but we don't need people to understand us to exist, be, breathe, eat, sleep, all those things I mentioned. And so that's key. Everything that we catastrophize and make into awful and terrible, you can always spot people who are very rational because they tend to have thinking that goes along those lines. Oh, this is unbearable. Oh, this is awful. Oh, I can't stand this. Oh my God, this has happened. The irrational cycle is very easy to get into. And more rational is this. Oh, I don't like that. It's not ideal. I wish that hadn't happened. I would prefer that didn't happen. I prefer they didn't say that. The irrational is usually fueled with emotion, hugely angry, hugely anxious. And that's always a good way to see when someone is irrational or where someone is rational. And these are very helpful skills for life in general. Everything that I do is teaching learning to be rational, and philosophy and anxiety skills and learning all these kinds of things. And that's what I'm doing day to day, all year round. And that comes from Stoicism, from Marcus Aurelius, Seneca the Younger, Epictetus, and so on, from Greek and Roman philosophy. Stood thousands and thousands of years and still very much true today because it's reality. Things aren't as scary as we think. Only our imagination makes them so scary in our head. Now, I've got some questions on here. So before I go on and on about philosophy, which I can do, I'm going to answer these. How can I tell what is OCD and what is recovering from COVID? Jordan, what is your fear here? Are you scared of long COVID or sensations relating to COVID, perhaps? Perhaps that's the thing causing this cycle. How to break rational beliefs about going crazy. We just recently had a webinar on this, Fear of Going Crazy webinar, covering all of that. There is no such thing as crazy. It's a thing we tend to see in movies, and we think that humans can go crazy and humans can be crazy and so on. No, that's not the case. It's normally schizophrenia, psychosis, very high anxiety things that can look like someone's going crazy. But people could describe anything as going crazy. People could describe someone who's really drunk going crazy, or really angry going crazy. Maybe someone dancing to a lot of music at a festival. Some people could regard that as crazy. So any aspect, it's a perspective. There's no such thing as crazy. But we tend to fear what we see in movies, where we see someone locked up in an old 1700 psychiatric unit, sort of in a straitjacket in a padded room, fear of losing control and hurting people. Those kind of aspects where people start to get stuck on that whole fear of going crazy scenario, very much into that, down that sort of avenue of thinking. There's plenty of great exposures we can do for that with films like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Shutter Island, all these kinds of things. So we expose to that fear of going crazy, fear of ending up in a psychiatric unit, or fear of being judged, fear of being seen as weird by others, friends, family, peers, whatever. Next question. Why does mine feel so real, but I believe that others aren't real? That is because it is latching to you. It's not concerned to others. And the fear that's latched feels the realest. The old one doesn't feel real anymore. The one that's lying dormant doesn't feel real until it's raised its head and latched. So OCD is going to feel real when it's latched. That's what it does, okay? It's going to feel as real as it can get. It's going to feel as real as it can possibly get. People always don't focus on that. They always think, oh, it should be OCD if it feels like the old OCD, but not this one because this one's different because it's latched to ... No, all OCD things are going to feel different and can feel whatever it is trying to do. So if you're very scared of it feeling real, or this one being real, it's going to feel very, very real. So I'm just doing an Instagram live. 1 second. I'm just doing Instagram live. So there's no noise in the background. With OCD, with the next question there, why does where were we before I was interrupted? 1 second. Did you ever get depressed? No. Depression wasn't one that was my particular situation. I never suffered from depression, although when I was scared of experiencing depressive symptoms, and I was scared that depression could lead to getting in a worse condition, then OCD mimicked depressive symptoms exactly, because that's what it does. It mimics the thing you're scared of. So when I was scared of schizophrenia, it very, very, very much latched to feeling as real as it can get. So intrusive images, intrusive thoughts, feeling like I could hear sounds that were repeating over and over in my head. Anything that mimicked schizophrenia. I'm just trying to catch a mosquito with the other hand. Anything that mimicked that. And if it was fear of psychosis or fear of, or things like fear of, with psychosis, it would be fear of being anxious about things, panicking about things, nervous about things, overly paranoid, which obviously mimics very much anxiety. And then the other fears were things like Alzheimer's, forgetting things. People often have that fear of early onset Alzheimer's. Those kind of ones, they often latch because people get scared of losing control, again, loss of control, getting more sick, getting more ill, all these variations it tends to latch to. Okay, let's have a look. And when it's latched to one thing, it stays latched, and then all the other things feel irrelevant, or other diseases don't feel as scary anymore because the one it's latched to is the one it's gripped. And so I often say to someone, you're so scared of schizophrenia, but what about all these other neurological diseases? No, just this one. This is the one that feels real, because that's how that latching mechanism works. Now, we can sort of flood it with others by saying, okay, what about 10 other neurological diseases? But it's not always going to release with that. Sometimes it's helpful. Oh, I could have this, why am I not scared? Doesn't always release with that. Often grips and goes, well, I've got a hold here with this, so I'm not going to let go just yet. Next thing, let's have a look here. George Ismail, how to deal with the anxiety when my mind is saying, do you actually find him attractive? This is my biggest fear, not being in the know. Well, the problem that you've got here, George, is you are trying to feel a feeling and it knows that you are trying to feel that. So because of that, it's turning up the heat and latching because it knows that you want that feeling. So it is doing that. It's gripping in there because of that. So you can't try and feel that feeling, and you need to move towards, even if you did find them attractive, because your fear is, what if I find them attractive? So what you've got to do is move towards, even if you did find them attractive, that's where you've got to go with it. The worst case scenario there is key. Don't avoid that. Do I have to tell, this is from Olivia, do I have to tell everyone in my life about my intrusive thoughts and OCD? What if they hate me after? No, you don't. You are not compelled to talk about your OCD. You don't have to. If you're avoiding telling everyone because you're so scared of them finding out, it may be a good exposure to tell them. It may be a good exposure to do that because you're scared of, what if they judge me? What if they think differently about me? What if I come across weird? What if when I even say those words, the whole ground swallows me up like sensation? So all variants of that. This is from, I can't read that username, but thank you so much for what you do. My question, how do you feel about the false memories, real memories after you've recovered? Now that question is designed to try and check will I know if it was real or not? Now let me highlight this. Yes, it unlatches when you get to that position of acceptance, and I can see them as just sort of uncertain or not that big a deal, not as scary as before. But even those fears, for me, are lots of those core fears. Even if they were real, I can see that life wouldn't be as terrifying as I imagined it to be. It wouldn't be as catastrophic as I imagined it to be. It felt catastrophic to me because I was looking at it through an irrational lens. But when I broke that down, it no longer had that grip. Right, next question. Let's have a look here. Sam Jones, how did you work through Albert Ellis's book, How to Stubbornly Refuse to Make Yourself Miserable? I read it, and I read it a few times, and when I did that, I broke down. I read the book a few times. I followed all breaking down the irrational beliefs forms, watched lots of videos by Albert Ellis. So really getting that message understood and in my head, so I didn't feel completely. At first, it's very hard. The sort of old language in it sometimes, and it can feel difficult. So you do need to read it a few times. You do need to practice it. Embodying unconditional self, life, and other acceptance takes lots and lots of practice. You're not going to just do that overnight because society tends to be conditioned in a way of conditional self-acceptance. So we are reversing that because conditional self-acceptance means if anything pulls on that condition, we then can't accept ourselves. And in life, things happen that we hadn't planned for and so on. So we will break those conditions that we had set, and then we will stay stuck chronically anxious or stuck chronically guilty. So that's why we work towards unconditional self-life and other acceptance. Why, this is from Beth, why do OCDs switch around once I've got over one? Because if they didn't, OCD wouldn't be much of a disorder. We've got brains that can think up a whole range of things, so it will move from one thing to the next. That's why we move towards unconditional, so that there's no conditions. And we tend to be there, putting a condition again, okay, just that one thought when I'm over, not about that thought, oh, no, and then going in that cycle again. So the unconditional provides a robust framework where it can't latch to anything. So that is the key component there. Shafe, how to stop worrying about screwing up at work? My anxiety is so high in work. Well, your fear here is either fear of, I imagine, losing your job, fear of being rejected by your boss or peers, and fear of maybe running out of money. All these elements that humans do tend to, in general, worry about in the work environment. However, with OCD, it feels like that on steroids. What if I end up homeless? What if I never get a job again? What if I get cancelled? What if anything that the brain can think of in association to that fear. Next question is by Jordan. Like I feel spacey, slight headache, I find myself asking, is this me, my OCD, or is this COVID recovery? Will I be disassociated forever? So that would be fear of depersonalization and derealization, or other physical symptoms that you can find on our YouTube channel. There's some videos covering that in detail. Fears of long COVID as well is about learning to accept those symptoms, make peace with those symptoms, because anxiety will exacerbate the already symptom that you experience from long COVID. It will turn the heat up on that fear and on those symptoms, because it knows that you have registered in your mind that those symptoms are bad, those symptoms are terrible and feel awful and whatever, and so it's jacking those up bit by bit, sort of hijacking those levers in our head, because it knows I really don't want those symptoms to be there and playing out in my head and ruining my human experience. This question is from Brandon Boyce. Why does OCD for me jump from OCD about going crazy to ROCD? I've read so many posts about other people's OCD and I don't obsess over them, because those ones aren't what it's latched to, because you either don't find those frightening, or it's just latched to this and it's got a hold, so it's hanging on in there. So it's one of those. But stop trying to compare why yours is different. That's one of the mistakes I made for years, going through loads and loads of anxiety forums. I've got this symptom, they've got that symptom. Why is mine different? Why is this different? And constantly doing that, which kept me stuck in a cycle of being scared of being stuck forever, fear of fear, and scared of being a unique case, which meant mine is real and not OCD and all this kind of stuff. Let's have a look here. Thank you very much, Momin, for helping out with some of these questions. Can you help on any tips to deal with intrusive thoughts? Tasmin. The best way to do this for intrusive thoughts is to really look at our YouTube channel. There's so many videos, 500 plus videos all around intrusive thoughts, and all advice about that. Try and move away from tips and tricks for intrusive thoughts, because that's usually trying to run away, trying to escape a particular sensation or get rid of anxiety in a quick fix, which we can't do it in a quick fix. So we don't want to get into that cycle. So look at it broadly as a process, as the recovery journey. Our YouTube channel has loads of free resources. We're trying to build ourselves into a sort of a large hub for free resources, so that wherever you are in the world, whatever language you speak, you can access free resources for OCD recovery in either a video or article format. And there's plenty of that already up, and we've got a lot more of it coming on soon. Next question. I can't answer every question just because there's quite a lot of questions on here and a lot of them overlap. Let's have a look. So thank you, Mr. Momin, for answering a lot of these. Let's have a little look. Adil, I'm afraid that nobody will take me seriously. That's a fear of being sort of lost, being left, not feeling in control, perhaps feeling alone. I imagine those are the core fears surrounding that fear, but I'd have to look at it in more detail. And again, it's about looking at breaking down that catastrophizing, which is going on there. By the Ellis books will help with that specifically, so we can see why those aren't scary, why those fears aren't scary and like we imagine them to be. We believe they're so terrifying, the worst thing ever. Let's have a look here. Getting bitten by a mosquito on my hand. Maybe it's trying to watch this Instagram live. I have trouble being by myself at school because I don't feel welcome. What to do? That is, again, being myself is because you're trying to control how you be and how you appear. It's like if you went on a date and you were like, I've got to appear cool, I've got to appear all these different ways, you'd be the opposite because you'd be so nervous about trying to internally control that so much. So it's about learning to accept the opposite of, even if this date doesn't go well, even if this school doesn't go well, even if they see you as a loser, even if they see you as an idiot, that it's not the end of the world. It's just their perception from their own minds, which we don't control, and the world doesn't end from these things. It's not as scary as we imagine it to be, as we perceive it to be in our minds. Let's have a little look here. Next question. How does accepting worst case scenarios for taboo themes, Danya? Well, that's very key too, because unconditional does exactly what it says on the tin. We're not saying you are it. We're not saying I have committed a murder. We're not saying I have a certain sexual tendency that the taboo theme is latched to. What we're saying is that because OCD latches with a 0.00001% possibility and doesn't release, often when it's stubborn and sticky and stuck in there, we want to look at, well, why would it be awful terrifying? Because those laws never apply in the laws of science. It would be very inconvenient. It would be very frustrating. I wouldn't like that behavior if I'd acted that way. The same as somebody who would seek help who had done that would be taught. It wouldn't be awful, unbearable. They could see that one behavior was a part of the process making up the self, but it's not the self in totality, because the problem is that. The problem is the fear of our whole self being written off if one of those conditions, one of those fears were to be the case. A great video for that is the 3-part video by Albert Ellis on YouTube, Guilt and Shame. It was very, very helpful for me 15 years ago. On when I was trying to recover from OCD, specifically latched to real event harm OCD. That was a really key one for that. Let me just have a look. Could you recover, Sam Jones, without help from somebody who's professional help, or somebody who specializes in OCD? It can be tricky. Otherwise, we wouldn't provide one-to-one coaching, group coaching, webinars, because doing it on your own is tricky. Can you do it on your own? Yes, absolutely you can, but it's easy to get lost because of the ways where we can get sort of stuck with, are we engaging in it too much? Are we disputing compulsively to get that balance right, as well as to understand how to get under our specific fears relating to our own scenario. So it really does help to have additional support on your own. It can be done, but it is tricky. Let's have a look. Any more questions here? Let's have a look here. OCD doesn't go in a day. It needs lifestyle changes. Absolutely. Everything takes practice. To understand these principles that we're talking about here, set out by Albert Ellis in the framework of unconditional self-life and other acceptance, it takes practice. One day at a time approach, bringing anxiety for the ride, not trying to rigidly get rid of it, not trying to rigidly apply unconditional self-life and other acceptance over and over and again to get rid of it, to get relief, not doing that, but learning as a process to break down the core fears, learning as a process like the works of Claire Weeks and Paul David to get comfortable with the physical anxiety sensations, not trying to get rid of those, wearing it like an uncomfortable coat, being at peace with it there, leaving it there, bringing it for the ride, living life as best you can with it there, whilst working on breaking those stubborn, irrational beliefs that we hold. I must not be anxious. I must not be stuck with OCD. I must not suffer any longer. It's awful if I suffer. It's awful if this were real. It's unbearable if this fear stays latched, and all of these other things. Guys, great to see you all on here. I will be back on another Instagram live very soon. I'm just away at the moment on vacation, but I am still doing lots of work because obviously there's a lot to do all the time with OCD, so I'm still doing sessions, but I will definitely have time, hopefully, to get some more Instagram lives in the next few days. So I will be back on here, but I've been meaning to do this one today, a slightly longer one, covering all the questions and answers, because I know you guys have got so many. If you want to ask any specific ones, you can go over to our Facebook group. Please join our Facebook group, OCD Recovery Group. That's got lots of moderators in there helping with support for your OCD questions. So you can head over to there, or you can come on the next Instagram live and ask the questions like today, and I will cover those. Guys, great to see you all. I will see you on the next Instagram live. Take it easy. Bye.